They say it with a smile, with a soft voice, with a kind gesture. I'm just helping. They insist, and at first, it feels like care, like concern, like someone finally noticing your needs. But over time, that phrase begins to feel heavier, sharper, more invasive, because real help begins with listening, and what they're offering isn't help. It's assumption, it's control dressed as kindness, and if you're over 60, you've likely felt this shift. The moment when someone rearranges your furniture without asking, changes your medication without consulting you, updates your phone settings without explaining, and each time, you're expected to smile, to say thank you, to accept the change, even when it disrupts your routine, your comfort, your sense of autonomy. She remembered the day her niece came over and reorganized her entire kitchen, said it was messy, said it was inefficient, said, "You'll thank me later." And when she tried to find her spices, her pans, her favorite mug, everything was different, unfamiliar, unreachable, and she didn't just feel disoriented. She felt erased, like her habits didn't matter, like her preferences were outdated, like her way of living was wrong. And that's the danger of unsolicited help. It replaces your voice with someone else's version of care. It silences your choices in the name of efficiency. It makes you feel like your independence is inconvenient. And slowly, you begin to question yourself. Not because you've changed, but because the world around you keeps changing without asking you first. It happens in hospitals, when nurses adjust your pillows without asking, when doctors prescribe new treatments without explaining, when caregivers decide your schedule without consulting you. It happens in families, when children say, "We're just trying to help," while making decisions behind your back, when they move your finances online without teaching you how to access them, when they cancel your subscriptions, your routines, your plans, all in the name of help. And each time, you're expected to be grateful, to be quiet, to be cooperative, even when your life feels less and less like your own. And if you're over 60, you've likely been made to feel like your pace is a problem, like your preferences are outdated, like your voice is optional. But it's not. Your voice is essential, your preferences are valid, your pace is your own. And anyone who helps without asking is not supporting you, they're controlling the narrative. She remembered the time her son changed her phone, said the old one was too slow, too confusing, too risky, and handed her a new device with no buttons, no familiarity, no instructions, and when she asked how to use it, he said, "Just tap here. It's easy. You'll get used to it." And when she couldn't answer calls, couldn't send messages, couldn't find her contacts, she didn't just feel frustrated. She felt invisible, like her comfort didn't matter. Like her learning curve was a burden, and that's what assumption does. It turns care into control, turns kindness into erasure, turns support into silence. And if you're over 60, you've likely been told it's for your own good more times than you can count, and each time, it feels less like protection and more like confinement. And the worst part is that it's often done by people who love you, who mean well, who genuinely believe they're helping. But good intentions don't excuse bad impact, and love doesn't justify erasure. She remembered the time her neighbor insisted on doing her grocery shopping, said it was safer, said it was easier, said, "You don't need to go out." And when she asked for specific brands, for her favorite snacks, for the things that made her feel like herself, he said, "I got what was best," and handed her bags filled with unfamiliar items, and she didn't just feel disappointed. She felt displaced, like her tastes didn't matter, like her identity was negotiable. And that's what happens when help becomes assumption. Your life becomes someone else's project, your choices become someone else's checklist, your voice becomes someone else's inconvenience. And if you're over 60, you've likely been made to feel like your independence is fragile, like your decisions are risky, like your autonomy is optional. But it's not. This chapter is a call to reclaim your right to be asked, to be heard, to be respected, to be consulted, because real help begins with listening, and anyone who helps without asking is not supporting you, they're managing you. And the moment you say, "Thank you, but I'll decide," you begin to reclaim not just your choices, but your dignity, your rhythm, your life. They say it with warmth, with conviction, with a hand on your shoulder. I'm always here for you. They promise, and at first, you believe them, because the words feel safe, feel loyal, feel like a lifeline in a world that's moving too fast. But over time, you begin to notice the pattern. They're there when it's easy, when it's visible, when it makes them look good. But when you truly need them, when you're vulnerable, when you're scared, when the timing is inconvenient, they vanish, they delay, they deflect, and suddenly, their presence feels conditional, their care feels scheduled, their loyalty feels performative. And if you're over 60, you've likely felt this quiet abandonment. The moment you call for help and get voicemail, the moment you ask for company and get excuses, the moment you share your pain and get silence. She remembered the time she had a medical scare, chest pain, dizziness, fear, and called her daughter, who said, "I'm in a meeting," called her neighbor, who said, "I'm out of town," called her friend, who said, "Can you wait until tomorrow?" And she ended up calling a cab, sitting alone in the emergency room, surrounded by strangers, wondering if her loneliness was her fault. And that's what conditional care does. It makes you feel guilty for needing support, ashamed for reaching out, hesitant to ask again. And slowly, you begin to shrink your needs, to silence your emotions, to pretend you're fine, not because you are, but because you've learned that your vulnerability is inconvenient. It happens in families, when children say, "Call me anytime," but never answer, when they say, "I'm just a text away," but never reply, when they say, "You can count on me," but only show up for birthdays, for photos, for moments that fit their schedule. It happens with friends, who disappear when you're grieving, who cancel when you're struggling, who say, "Let me know if you need anything," but never follow through. It happens with caregivers, who clock in and out, who do the minimum, who smile while ignoring your emotional needs. And each time, you're left wondering, am I asking for too much? Am I being needy? Should I just stay quiet? But staying quiet is not strength, it's surrender, and you don't owe anyone your silence just because they're uncomfortable with your truth. She remembered the time she needed help filling out a government form. Confusing language, tight deadline, real consequences. And her son said, "I'll do it later," said, "It's not urgent," said, "I'm busy." And when the deadline passed, when the benefits were delayed, when the stress piled up, she didn't just feel frustrated. She felt abandoned, not by circumstance, but by someone who said he'd always be there. And that's what performative support does. It shows up when it's easy, disappears when it's hard, and leaves you questioning your worth. And if you're over 60, you've likely been made to feel like your emergencies should be scheduled, like your emotions should be quiet, like your needs should be convenient. But they shouldn't. Your needs are valid, your timing is real, your vulnerability is human. And anyone who says, "I'm here for you," but only shows up when it suits them is not offering care, they're offering performance. This chapter is a call to notice the difference between words and actions, between promises and presence, between loyalty and convenience. And the moment you say, "I need people who show up when it's hard," you begin to reclaim not just your support system, but your self-worth. They say it with confidence, with warmth, with a reassuring smile. "You can trust me," they insist, and at first, those words feel like comfort, like safety, like someone is finally taking the burden off your shoulders. But over time, you begin to notice the gaps, the missing explanations, the skipped steps, the vague summaries that leave you nodding without understanding, signing without clarity, agreeing without choice. And if you're over 60, you've likely been told, "Don't worry about the details, it's too technical, I've got it covered." And each time those phrases, delivered with calm authority, make you feel like asking questions is unnecessary, like understanding is optional, like your curiosity is a problem. But it's not. She remembered the time her financial advisor changed her investment plan, said it was safer, smarter, better, and when she asked for the breakdown, he said, "It's complicated." And when she asked again, he said, "You don't need to worry." And when the returns didn't come, when the fees piled up, when the paperwork confused her, she didn't just feel betrayed. She felt foolish for trusting blindly. And that's what hidden details do. They turn trust into dependence, turn clarity into confusion, turn empowerment into silence. It happens in hospitals, when doctors prescribe treatments without explaining side effects, When nurses administer medication without telling you what it is. When caregivers change your routine without asking how it feels. It happens in families, when children make financial decisions on your behalf, when they update your insurance, your passwords, your bank accounts, all without walking you through the changes. It happens in legal matters, when someone says, just sign here, it's standard, you don't need to read all that, and you're left wondering what you've agreed to, what you've given away, what you've lost, and each time, you're expected to trust. Not because you understand, but because they said you should. And slowly, you begin to doubt your right to ask, your ability to understand, your place in the conversation. Not because you're incapable, but because someone else keeps treating you like you are. She remembered the time her son changed her mobile plan, said it was cheaper, better, simpler, and when she couldn't make calls, couldn't access data, couldn't reach her contacts, he said, you're just not used to it. And when she asked for the details, he said, it's all online. And when she asked for help, he said, I'll explain later, and later never came, and that's what secrecy does. It makes you feel like your confusion is your fault, like your silence is your choice, like your discomfort is your weakness. And if you're over 60, you've likely been made to feel like transparency is too much to ask, like understanding is beyond your reach, like trust means surrender, but it doesn't. Trust should never require blindness, should never demand silence, should never be built on withheld information. This chapter is a call to reclaim your right to know, to ask, to understand. Because real trust is built on truth, and anyone who hides details while asking for your signature is not protecting you, they're protecting themselves. And the moment you say, I won't agree until I understand, you begin to reclaim not just your decisions, but your dignity, your clarity, your power. They say it with pride, with politeness, with performative affection. I respect you, they declare, and at first, those words feel like validation, like recognition, like someone finally sees your worth. But over time, you begin to notice the cracks, the interruptions mid-sentence, the eye rolls when you speak, the quick subject changes when your thoughts don't align with theirs, and suddenly, that respect feels hollow, feels rehearsed, feels like a mask worn to avoid accountability. And if you're over 60, you've likely felt this erosion. The moment your opinion is met with a chuckle, the moment your story is cut short, the moment your suggestion is brushed aside with, that's old-fashioned. You wouldn't understand. We do things differently now. She remembered the time she spoke up at a family dinner, shared her thoughts on relationships, on values, on how things used to be, and her grandson laughed, said, that's not how the world works anymore. And the table moved on, and she sat there, quiet, wondering if her experience had expired. And that's what performative respect does. It praises you in public but silences you in private. It nods while ignoring. It smiles while erasing. It happens in hospitals, when doctors speak over you, not to you, when nurses explain things to your children instead of you, when your questions are met with, let's not worry about that. It happens in families, when children say, we value your input, but make decisions without you, when they say, we'll ask you next time, but never do, when they say, you're important, but treat you like a formality. It happens in social circles, when friends talk over you, when neighbors dismiss your concerns, when younger people treat your wisdom like nostalgia instead of insight. And each time, you're left wondering, am I being too sensitive? Am I out of touch? Should I just stay quiet? But staying quiet is not peace, it's erasure, and you don't owe anyone your silence just because they're uncomfortable with your truth. She remembered the time her caregiver changed her routine, said it was more efficient, said it was better for her health, said, trust me, and when she asked to keep her old schedule, to eat at her usual time, to walk in her favorite park, he said, you're being difficult. And she didn't just feel dismissed, she felt disrespected, not because she was wrong, but because her preferences were inconvenient, and that's what subtle disrespect does. It makes you feel like your voice is a burden, like your ideas are outdated, like your presence is tolerated but not valued. And if you're over 60, you've likely been made to feel like your wisdom is irrelevant, like your stories are too long, like your insights are inconvenient. But they're not. Your experience is a library. Your perspective is a compass. Your voice is a legacy. And anyone who says, I respect you, but constantly talks over you, corrects you, or laughs at you is not honoring you. They're managing your presence. This chapter is a call to reclaim your space in the conversation, to recognize subtle disrespect as a red flag, to remind yourself, and others, that respect isn't in words, it's in behavior, in listening, in inclusion. And the moment you say, I have something to say, and I expect to be heard, you begin to rewrite the narrative, not just of your silence, but of your power. They say it with pride, with bluntness, with a tone that dares you to challenge them. I'm just being honest. They declare, and at first, those words sound like truth, like clarity, like someone who refuses to sugarcoat reality. But over time, you begin to feel the sting, not of truth, but of cruelty disguised as candor, of criticism dressed as care, of judgment wrapped in the language of integrity. And if you're over 60, you've likely heard it too many times. You're too sensitive. You're not as sharp as you used to be. You're stuck in the past. And each time those words, delivered with a shrug or a smirk, make you feel smaller, not wiser. Not because you're wrong, but because someone else has decided that your feelings are flaws, that your emotions are weaknesses, that your boundaries are excuses. She remembered the time her friend told her she was too emotional, said, you take everything personally, said, you need to toughen up. And when she tried to explain how those words made her feel, her friend said, see? You're doing it again. And she didn't just feel hurt. She felt erased, invalidated, made to believe that her pain was proof of her inadequacy. And that's what weaponized honesty does. It silences your emotions, shames your reactions, and makes you feel like you're the problem for feeling anything at all. It happens in families, when children say, you're not capable anymore, instead of asking what you need, when they say, you're being dramatic, instead of listening to your concerns, when they say, I'm just telling the truth, while tearing down your confidence. It happens in friendships, when people say, I'm just being real, while mocking your choices, when they say, you need to hear this, while delivering unsolicited advice, when they say, don't take it personally, after saying something deeply personal. It happens in caregiving, when someone says, you're being difficult, instead of acknowledging your discomfort, when they say, you're overreacting, instead of validating your fear, when they say, I'm just being honest, while ignoring your dignity. And each time, you're left wondering, am I too sensitive? Am I imagining things? Should I just accept it? But acceptance is not healing, and silence is not strength, and you don't owe anyone your emotional surrender just because they call their cruelty truth. She remembered the time her daughter said, you're not good with money, said it casually, said it in front of others, said it like a fact. And when she tried to defend herself, to explain her choices, her daughter said, I'm just being honest. And she didn't just feel embarrassed. She felt exposed, like her entire identity had been reduced to a single judgment. And that's what this kind of honesty does. It doesn't enlighten, it wounds. It doesn't clarify, it humiliates. It doesn't build, it breaks. And if you're over 60, you've likely been made to feel like your emotions are liabilities, like your reactions are irrational, like your truth is too much. But it's not. Your truth is valid, your emotions are intelligent, your boundaries are sacred. And anyone who uses honesty to hurt you is not being honest. They're being cruel. This chapter is a call to reclaim your emotional space, to recognize the difference between truth and attack, to remind yourself, and others, that real honesty heals, not harms. And the moment you say, I welcome truth, but not cruelty, you begin to reclaim not just your voice, but your emotional safety, your self-respect, your peace. They say it with concern, with conviction, with a tone that sounds like love but feels like control. I'm doing this for your own good. They insist, and at first, those words feel like protection, like someone is watching out for you, like you're being cared for in a world that often forgets the elderly. But over time, you begin to feel the weight of those words, not as comfort, but as confinement, not as safety, but as suffocation. Because when someone constantly decides what's best for you, without asking what you want, without listening to your voice, without respecting your boundaries, It's not care, it's quiet domination. And if you're over 60, you've likely heard it in 100 different ways. You shouldn't drive anymore. You don't need to handle your own finances. You're better off staying home. And each time, those decisions are made for you, not with you, and slowly, your world begins to shrink. Not because you're incapable, but because someone else keeps treating you like you are. She remembered the time her daughter took away her car keys, said it was for safety, said it was temporary, said, "You'll be fine without driving." And when she tried to explain how much driving meant to her, the freedom, the routine, the dignity, her daughter said, "You're being stubborn." And she didn't just feel grounded, she felt erased, like her independence was inconvenient, like her voice was a threat to someone else's comfort. And that's what overprotective care does. It replaces your choices with someone else's fear, replaces your autonomy with someone else's anxiety, replaces your life with someone else's version of safety. It happens in families, when children make medical decisions without consulting you, when they move you into a new home without asking how you feel, when they cancel your plans, your subscriptions, your routines, all in the name of what's best. It happens in caregiving, when someone changes your diet without asking, when they rearrange your furniture without permission, when they decide your schedule, your bedtime, your hobbies, and expect you to be grateful. It happens in institutions, when policies are made without your input, when systems treat you like a number, when your preferences are dismissed as impractical. And each time, you're expected to smile, to cooperate, to accept. Even when your spirit feels smaller, even when your dignity feels bruised, even when your identity feels diluted. And slowly, you begin to question yourself, not because you've changed, but because the world around you keeps changing without asking you first. She remembered the time her son installed cameras in her home, said it was for her safety, said it was to monitor her health, said, "It's just in case." And when she asked for privacy, for space, for respect, he said, "You're overreacting." And she didn't just feel watched, she felt invaded. Like her home was no longer hers. Like her comfort was secondary to someone else's control. And that's what this kind of care does. It makes you feel like your resistance is irrational, like your discomfort is disobedience, like your desire for autonomy is dangerous. And if you're over 60, you've likely been made to feel like your independence is a risk, like your decisions are mistakes, like your freedom is negotiable. But it's not. Your freedom is sacred, your voice is essential, your preferences are valid. And anyone who makes you feel smaller in the name of protection is not caring for you, they're controlling you. This chapter is a call to reclaim your right to choose, to speak, to resist. Because real care uplifts, not restricts, and real love listens, not dictates. And the moment you say, "I appreciate your concern, but I'll decide what's best for me," you begin to reclaim not just your boundaries, but your strength, your space, yourself. They say it with warmth, with tears, with conviction. "I love you," they whisper, and at first, those words feel like shelter, like safety, like the one thing you can count on when everything else feels uncertain. But over time, you begin to notice the tension, the way you hesitate before speaking, the way you rehearse your words before sharing a concern, the way you shrink yourself to avoid conflict, and suddenly, that love feels conditional, feels fragile, feels like something you must earn, rather than something freely given. And if you're over 60, you've likely felt this quiet pressure. The moment you bite your tongue to avoid upsetting someone, the moment you pretend to agree just to keep the peace, the moment you suppress your discomfort because they mean well. And slowly, your home becomes a stage, your relationships become performances, your emotions become secrets. She remembered the time her son said, "I love you, Mom," after a heated argument. Said it with a hug, said it with a sigh, said it like a peace offering, but then added, "You just make things harder sometimes." And that sentence, that qualifier, that emotional caveat made her feel like love was a transaction, like affection was earned through silence, like her worth was tied to her obedience. And that's what conditional love does. It makes you feel like your truth is dangerous, like your boundaries are betrayal, like your voice is a threat to the relationship. It happens in families, when children say, "I love you," but guilt trip you for saying no, when they say, "I care," but ignore your discomfort, when they say, "You're everything to me," but make you feel like nothing when you disagree. It happens in marriages, when partners say, "I love you," but control your choices, when they say, "I'm here for you," but disappear when you need emotional support, when they say, "You're my world," but make you walk on eggshells to avoid their moods. It happens in friendships, when people say, "You're like family," but mock your opinions, when they say, "I'll always be there," but only show up when it's convenient, when they say, "You matter," but treat you like a burden, and each time, you're left wondering, is this love or is this fear? Is this care or is this control? Is this connection or is this captivity? But love should never feel like a trap, and safety should never require silence, and you don't owe anyone your emotional surrender just because they say, "I love you." She remembered the time her caregiver said, "I care about you deeply." Said it while adjusting her medication, said it while changing her routine, said it while ignoring her protests, and when she asked to keep her old schedule, to eat what she preferred, to walk when she wanted. He said, "You're being difficult," and she didn't just feel dismissed. She felt punished, like her autonomy was a threat to his affection, and that's what emotional captivity does. It makes you question your instincts, doubt your reactions, fear your own truth. And if you're over 60, you've likely been made to feel like your peace is selfish, like your voice is disruptive, like your needs are unreasonable. But they're not. Your needs are valid, your voice is sacred, your truth is powerful. And anyone who makes you feel like you must tiptoe around their love is not loving you, they're managing you. This chapter is a call to reclaim your emotional space, to recognize that real love doesn't punish honesty, doesn't fear boundaries, doesn't shrink your spirit. And the moment you say, "I deserve love that lets me breathe," you begin to reclaim not just your relationships, but your freedom, your dignity, yourself.